Hey everyone, this is Devin Francis, also known as Leonard Meltzner.
And this is going to be a quick recording.
Yeah, this is for the first time ever our third take of an episode. Never before happened have we lost footage twice of the same thing. But something is seriously wrong with our recording software.
Your recording software.
In yours too, you lost all of the first episode. I only lost the first half. It's both of our softwares. That's why we're both using new software now, alternate software. What are we doing today, Victoria?
We're doing the April Odyssey episode of the month, which is Drake and the Time That Time Forgot, and Wooton's Broken Pencil Show from album 52.
Yes. So, episode 841, Drake and the Time That Time Forgot, written by Bob Hoose.
So in this episode we have Drake, and this carries on a little while after the last episode. The last minute from the original Drake episode is not canon. So in this episode we have Drake, and he's like not doing that great with Boss Penny. Boss Penny sends him off on a mission. He meets this girl who's Emily, and she's a scientist. She seems like she's 12, but she's actually like really old. And she wants to go back in time to kill Space Hitler because Space Hitler caused the death of her father. And Drake tells her not to. And there's this other robot named Genesis that tells her not to, and Wit says not to. And then she goes back, and then Drake gives her a long speech about how she shouldn't like turn Space Hitler into a baby. And then Drake does it by accident, and then they get sent forward in time, and it turns out Space Hitler is Boss Penny's mom, and then it turns out it was all fake, and the episode ends.
Yes.
It was about not changing bad things or whatever. I thought it was a good episode.
There's a very despondent tone going on right now.
That's because I'm not happy right now.
We literally just lost the footage for the last one like 2 minutes before starting this one. We're gonna power through it, whether we like it or not. Yeah, in the end, it's like, oh, plot twist, it was all fake. I was really happy. I saw it coming like 60 seconds before it happened. I was like, it didn't go back in time. Genesis did all of this as a fake thing because she wanted to convince Emily not to go back in time, and so this whole thing has been a cautionary lesson in like fake illusion. And it was thus. So, the narrative structure of this episode is wrapped up in like it's a kids' radio presentation of the Drake the Cosmic Copper story. Wooton starts out the broadcast being like, here are the characters, and this is what they're like. And Connie's like, they either know the characters or they'll catch on. Let's get a move on. I was like, man, I wish some pieces of media could take this attitude on when it comes to like exposition for like non-pilot material.
I didn't like this part in the episode. I thought it was dumb.
Mainly a series of unfortunate events was like the peak thing that I thought of out of everything I've ever consumed. I think was the worst for that. And it was funny because as I was working my way up to the end of that sentence in our very first recording, Victoria cut me off and said a series of unfortunate events. So, love those books to death, but primary complaint is that way that every book, it's like, gotta explain it all from the beginning with like the same word choice, word for word, same every single time. So Drake and Woots go to the space-time condominiums because they're like, hey, somebody has a time machine or whatever, and they go into the apartment, and Dr. Emily Game is like, get out of here. No, the machine is starting up. You need to get out of here. Oh, there's no time. You're going to get sucked into it, but maybe you think you should leave. I don't know. Let's kind of have a chat about this, and we'll have a discussion. Maybe you can weigh some pros and cons, do like a chi-squared analysis of what like the, figure out what the advantages and disadvantages. This is such a high tense situation, and it's going on for a really awkwardly long time for a scene that seems like it would be really quick. You got sucked into the thing, but here we are. We're still talking. It's still happening. This very long initiation procedure for the time travel. It was like a very weird, drawn out, single climactic moment. Like, it was strange. Dragged out longer than a Westworld plot twist, and you're just kind of hanging there top like, Yep, it's happening. I got it. Okay, I got it. We all got it. You can go now. Thank you.
It goes on for like 20 more minutes.
Exactly. It was a heck of a plot twist. Amazing twist. But the execution...
It was one of the best plot twists I've seen in years.
But
they explained it for 20 minutes straight. You figured it out 2 minutes in.
It was an amazing flip. They did not stick the landing on execution. This episode, basically, obviously, a sci-fi take on the old let's go back in time and kill Hitler shtick.
The best person who's ever done this is John Mulaney, who... It wasn't exactly let's go back in time and kill Hitler. It was more like if you saw Hitler.
Yeah, it's kind of key that he cut that bit out.
What?
It's kind of key that he cut that bit out. The time travel part. And like, would you kill Hitler now?
Well, like...
Why did you shoot that man? I thought he was Hitler. No, that's just an old man with a mustache. But he looked like Hitler. A little, I guess.
John Mulaney's good. Everyone go watch his stand-up.
He's so funny.
What do you think Jesus is celebrating? Well, I don't know. No, I know. Like, I need to hear it from you. Thanksgiving.
It's so funny. She's Jewish, Victoria.
I know.
She's Jewish.
I know.
She thought it was Thanksgiving.
I don't think anyone else thinks Thanksgiving goes back that far. But, like, I love her, though.
Oh.
I love her.
It's like you should be more qualified than anyone to know the answer to this question.
Anyway.
So, yeah, it's a very soft take on the let's kill Hitler back in time thing, because they're like, we won't kill him, but we will de-age him into a baby, which is, in a way, a bit of a critical difference.
It's Sky High.
It is Sky High, but backwards.
The only difference between this and Sky High is that
the shoe is on
Hitler
the other
doesn't
foot.
make out with Drake.
The shoe is on the other foot because it's the good guys with the age gun instead of the bad guy. So...
I mean, the good guys did take the age gun in Sky High.
But that's not the plot. That's not the...
That is the plot. The plot is the bad guys to take it back. Pay attention, Devin. Go watch Sky High
I haven't watched it in a while.
I haven't watched it in probably a decade.
So, yeah, it turns out to be kind of a critical difference, the whole, like, oh, we did kill him, we just made him a baby thing. Because the whole reason it didn't work in the end is because the Emperor just grew up and was even angrier about having to go through puberty twice. Which is also what happened to the bad guy in Sky High.
Twice as angry.
Because of twice the puberty.
Many sad emotions.
Yes.
Twice as much angst.
So.
Twice as many friends. 4 times as many enemies.
So. Yeah, they kind of, like, ruin the concept in that they're like, oh, well, you know, maybe it would have been different if we had killed the Emperor instead of, you know, using the age thing. So they arrive in the past with a gun, move over to the grassy knoll. Second reference to that, the JFK assassination, specifically the grassy knoll bit that the show has made since Sunset Boulevard, when Harlow makes that talking about the death of crackers. The voice of the Emperor, I mean, clearly they're going for like a Darth Vader spoof thing with, you know, talking about the mask and the design from the episode art. But it felt like there was supposed to be some sort of impression going on as well with the inflection of the voice. It was like really weirdly like up and down and up and down.
Probably from Star Trek.
Pretty odd. I don't think it had a very Star Trek feel to it because it was the pitch of the
Star
voice.
Trek can be weird, David.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't realize, Victoria. Yeah, it's strange. So they go. They're like, Draker's like, no, you can't do this. It's wrong to change history. And then, 30 seconds later, he shoots the Emperor and youngs him down. And at this point, I'm like, oh, I see. The point of this episode is going to be about, like, hypocrisy and letting your emotions and snap judgments get the better of you if, you're not careful or not grounded to avoid having these things happen to you, giving into temptation, temper, things like that. Never addressed again. Not a single mention of the way that Drake hypocritically went back on his convictions and then shot someone.
I have confidence it will be mentioned as a personality trait he will develop in future episodes. He's already developed from how he was in the last episode. He hasn't lost any of his characterization. It's been 4 years. I think that's pretty good considering how bad Captain Absolutely was when he came back after a couple years.
But that's for later in the episode. Yeah, I mean, and that was kind of the defining opening aspect for Drake. Like defining a trait at the beginning of the first episode, like how hot-headed and impulsive he was. I'd throw you out of this precinct, but you're the best dang cop on the force. Kind of trope.
I can't even remember what I've said in this episode and what I haven't.
Yeah, I know. That's why I told you it's hard to re-record things. So return to present day, and then almost immediately the lights start going off as to the temporal anomalies going on. I was like, it's strange how Penny remembers the previous timeline before he changed things. Like, what's the point of changing history if everyone remembers what you did before, apart from, like all the people who aren't dead now, ideally? That kind of defeats the point otherwise of changing history. And then they're like, you just happen to land in this museum of all of your failures and all the specific ways that you screwed up over the previous timeline that no one should be aware of. And the most bizarre point before we realized that it was all fake is how specific the focus is on, like, oh, and he killed all of these Christians specifically. You remember that really obscure religion that in the first episode no one had ever heard of before because we were on a planet so far away, so far in the future, that people don't even know what water is. And yet you're telling me that the Emperor made, like, a specific, like, grudge against Christianity, not just religions in general, because there were so many other large prominent ones, much more prominent ones, given how obscure it was in the first episode, and it just makes no sense. And I was like, oh, they didn't go back in time because Genesis was like, don't do time travel. And she was like, I'm going to do time travel. And so she's like, we're traveling in time, guys. Cautionary tale lesson. And then that's what it was.
I think
gotcha.
That...
Also, when she was like, and I was the mother of the Commander Penny all along. And I was like, yeah, okay.
I think that... the whole Christianity hallucination thing, they're like, oh, they're all dead, was playing upon Drake's worst fears because Genesis scanned Drake and Woots when they first came in, and it was just building off of that. So I don't think that's like a plot hole or anything like that.
No, I don't think it is either. I think it would be if this was like, if that was real, the time travel stuff, then it would be a plot hole. But it would be a plot hole among many, if that was the case, which it wasn't. So, the lesson of the episode did eventually spin back around to something more applicable, because at first it seemed like it was going to be like a, don't go back in time and kill Hitler, kids, if you have a time machine, because it's not going to stop World War II from happening. If anything, you should go back to 1918 and convince the League of Nations to better balance the Treaty of Versailles, which is not a terribly practical lesson for a 10-year-old, but the general concepts of regret and dwelling on the past and understanding how God eventually works current events together for good despite how bad they may be now is an important lesson. The latter half, theologically, can be a hard thing to swallow sometimes if we don't understand what it means. I feel a lot of people have a deep misunderstanding of that, because the fact that God has a plan and works things together for his good does not mean that all things are good because they're all a part of his plan. And this episode is a prime example, pulling on the World War II imagery and the Holocaust stuff, because, the fact that they were like, oh, this is way in the future, we're going back 100 years to stop this. The 100-year thing specifically, when it's set that far in the future, and any amount of arbitrary time to go back would be equally plot acceptable. It's very clear that that's what they were going after. And to try and allege misunderstandingly that like, oh, well, God planned the Holocaust, or it just seemed bad because we can't see how it was actually good because of God's secret plans. That would be one of the most horrible and inaccurate things a person could possibly say. Terribly wrong.
I just smiled at a bad moment, but that's because I saw a thing. Sorry.
Oh yeah.
Everyone was wondering why I smiled.
We lost the me dying bit, didn't we? From last one, where I swallowed the water the wrong way in the middle of recording. That was in the last video, I think.
Do it again. Lost
your clever jab about how it was meant to happen, and I almost lost on a valuable life experience.
I mean, I wouldn't consider that a clever jab. I think I was more like annoyed at you, but
yeah, some things that happen are just bad, straight up and down, because God doesn't cause everything to happen. Some things just happen and are awful, and His plan will work them together for the good, which some people might accidentally read as He caused the bad things so that good things will happen later. But we know this from Scripture that the ends don't justify the means, so that could not be true theologically. He plans His goodness around the things that He knows will happen, but knowing they'll happen and causing them to happen are so far from being the same for a being outside of the fourth dimension. I think most people viewing this should be aware of this already, but sometimes it's good to like recontextualize it in your mind, to have a reminder, stuff like that. Even usually when I'm writing down stuff like this for the podcast, I'll have new epiphanies or ways of expressing things. I'll be like, oh, that's good.
Mm-hmm.
It's good to get those things out there in your brain space, in the web space, all that stuff. Decent episode.
Going back on what you said before about World Wars, biggest thing you learned after taking a history of Germany class is all the World Wars what happened anyway.
Yes.
They just needed an excuse.
Yeah, that's the real lesson here. That's why it kind of works out anyways, because it's like, oh, well, the lesson doesn't apply because like they didn't shoot Hitler. They just like made him a baby. But it's like, yeah, but even if they shot him, that still wouldn't have done it because there was still so much massive inflation financially going on in Germany, and people needed a wheelbarrow full of bills to pay for a loaf of bread, and they'd taken away all of their military power.
Don't even get me started on World War I.
Exactly.
That was like even worse.
The powder keg,
World War II.
trampoline. It was like a slow-mo guys video where you have the trampoline covered in mouse traps. That's what Europe was in 1914.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. And they just needed an excuse, and that excuse was Dan falling on the trampoline.
Yes. Falling on the trampoline into the river with a broken revolver and expired cyanide.
Yep. And this gig and a half.
Yeah.
Anyway, so I think the characterization this episode was really good. I enjoyed it. I was really worried, like I said before, that everything was going to be off, like how it was when Captain Absolutely came back to Odyssey after a couple of years. But I thought Drake was in character. I could see that how he'd changed since the last episode, and I like that. I like that it looks like Penny is going to be an antagonistic force in the episodes.
I mean,
fight me on it.
I wouldn't say antagonist.
Oh, sorry. I guess I got confused by the fact that she's been the antagonist in every episode so far. You're right. I'm wrong.
She was in the antagonist in this episode?
Yes.
How so? Because she sent Drake to do his job?
No, it was a fake antagonist.
Yeah, fake. She wasn't.
When the time came for the antagonist to show up, it was her.
I mean, it was Genesis, really, sort of.
Yeah, but she is played as an antagonistic force.
Yeah, but I mean, in such a like.
Nope.
It's played as.
Nope.
The way it's played is that it's entirely in Drake's head, and that she's not actually antagonistic beyond like.
She's an antagonistic force to
he's
Drake.
His most slacker employee, and she just tries to get him to do his job once in a while.
Anyway, so I like how everything changed. I thought it was a good way to continue. I like that it didn't have certain characters from the original episode. Like, it didn't have Mob Boss Wit or Love Interest Connie, and I actually kind of liked that because I felt like it didn't have to rely on them to carry certain parts of the story. And I like that Drake can expand his character beyond their influence now that he's been influenced by them, and now he's gonna grow through their influence even if they're not present, and I like that. So I'm going to give this episode a 4 out of 5. I thought it was pretty good. Penny's mom is Space Hitler, and there's this really cute moment at the end of the episode where Wooton was like, "Thanks for being in my thing, Mrs. Wise," and she was like, "Please call me Mom," and then I started crying. And Devin, what's your rating?
Very good thing that you forgot to say. It was a comparison
was good.
Of a past episode about like not wanting to lose out on the past because it has shaped the person that you are.
Katrina and Eugene, with Katrina wanting Eugene to forget about Navicom when he lost his memories.
You know, I'm 44. Yeah, it's a good connection that I didn't make.
Good.
Yes.
Good episode. That's how I first learned that lesson.
Mm-hmm.
Good episode. Devin, what do you rate this? Rate it.
I believe I gave it a 3.4. I was like...
You gave it a 3.5.
Okay.
I remember.
All right, I'm sure you do.
3.5.
It was, you know, as comebacks go after that long, they did a decent job at bringing it back. It was a good plot twist.
They did a good job.
Yeah.
It wasn't as good as the original. I've listened to the original a lot. An embarrassingly high... Actually, I'm not embarrassed. I've listened to it probably over 20 times. I'll say it proudly.
You knew you were never embarrassed the first 2 times we recorded this.
Yeah. It's hard for me to get embarrassed about the media I consume.
That's good. Good thing.
Actually, it's very difficult for me. I love Shrek the Musical. There, I said it.
Tell me about how much you love Rick and Morty, Victoria. You just love that Szechuan sauce, right?
Give your rating,
no
Devin.
shame. I did give my rating. Yeah, no, a good revival. It was a decent plot twist, even though I figured it out before it happened. It wasn't long, and, you know, in a general sense, like, yes, it was a good twist. You know, there's a lot of campiness that goes on with this in general because of the setting, because it's, you know, a story being written by Wooton and being broadcast on kids' radio and all that stuff. That's to be expected. So I'm like, you know, I don't always care for it in the fullness, but I'm not going to dock too many marks for that. So 3.5, you know, I was like, it's good. It is acceptable.
Okay.
Yeah.
And now the next episode.
Yes, let's talk about Wooton's Broken Pencil Show, album 52. So, before we talk about Wooton's Broken Pencil Show, I realized, just for like 2 minutes, forgot to talk about the web stuff for Drake. So let's tack that on real quick. The documentary opens on what I can only describe as a speeded version of a rejected opening scene from 1960's classic Who, which goes on for a full 3.5 minutes and is as bad as it sounds, intentionally, but still. And then Bob visits a high school robotics class, takes a peek around, talks to a teacher with, let's be honest, way too many different engineering degrees, including a PhD to be teaching a high school class. And then he talks to Bob Hoose, and he's like, "You've been working on Drake since his very first episode." I'm like, this is literally the second episode.
He's been working on it every second since the first episode.
This is a proud legacy. He's been writing this
24/7
for 4 years, writing Drake and the Time Forgot.
Doing everything.
This is life's work. So he talks about how the concept for Drake originated. And it was like Drake was originally 2 brothers in the first concept. There were 2 brothers in the future protecting the world against Mexican armadas and cat velociraptors and grandmas, and there's a meteor, and it was just called 2 brothers.
It was 2 brothers.
It's just 2 brothers.
There's too many Rick and Morty jokes in this episode. I don't like it. We need to delete the footage and start again.
The 2 brothers joke is so classic, though. Bob, it's a good joke because it always sneaks up on you. Except this one, because this is the 3rd time I've told it. Bob,
I forgot you were gonna tell it.
Bob also even though it's been like half an hour. Bob also,
my head hurts like a lot.
Well, it's working to my advantage. Bob also talked about how he reviews other media for work, and I'm assuming he was talking about Plugged In, and he mentioned how he was working on a game with a robot sidekick that inspired Woots, which makes me think that Woots is probably based on Claptrap from Borderlands, because I can't think of who else in like a really mainstream game that would be. If you can think of another one, put it in the description. And then in the web quest, there was an interview with Terry Virts, the astronaut who brought an AIOO album into space about a decade ago now. So I was like, yeah, I know who you are. We talked about that. And that's about it. That's the end of that. Let's talk about Wooton's Broken Pencil Show. So,
this episode is broken.
Episode 669.
I don't like it.
Written by Paul McCusker. What happens?
No, you're doing the summary for this one.
All right. It's Candid Conversations with Connie. And they're renovating the kids' radio studio, and so they've been relegated to the sound effects closet. But then Connie's keys are locked in her car, and her car alarm is going off.
Connie's keys, my favorite Odyssey one-liner.
So...
Did you get that joke?
No.
It's like Connie's quick.
I thought that was a guess, but that wasn't the line. So I was...
I know, it's called a joke, Devin. I changed it slightly.
No, I mean Connie's quick. Connie's quick isn't the line
so you
either.
can learn about those comedy lessons
From Steve Martin.
Justin's been taking.
From Steve Martin. But Connie's quick isn't the line either. It was that Connie's quick. That's why I was confused. Anyways. Wooton takes over the show, and then he does a bunch of little bits talking about car alarms and many various things, and then the main body of the story is a Captain Absolutely story about pro wrestling and laughing gas. So, this episode has a very live show feel to it. The broadcast format of the narrative, the skits and the story fragmentation, the silly character voices, lots of sound effects on like the chart of everything that we made, of all the things that belie a typical live show. The only key thing that strikes me as standing out differently is that there's way too many scenes with only one character monologuing to the radio audience for a live show. Live shows typically have a lot more like playing off of each other. Yeah.
I don't like this episode.
I know. This was Harlow's first appearance since the hiatus. And if I remember correctly, which I think I do, it was the first it was actually a major thing, Harlow appearing here, much more major than it would seem after the fact if you weren't listening to this when it came out. Because if I remember correctly, and I believe that I do, this was the first appearance of any old character post-hiatus apart from Whit, Connie, Eugene, and Wooton. I remember during the second hiatus, we were constantly told by the crew about how hard, how severe this cast refresh was going to be. So much harder than the initial one. Betwixt albums 28 and 29, the crew was constantly telling us how, quote, Whit, Connie, Eugene, and Wooton, end quote, would all stick around. Always that exact list, never only 3 of them, never 5 of them. And because it was always precisely those 4, we were, as a fandom, very worried that literally all other characters would be gone. And in album 51, they were the only ones that we saw. It was very disheartening. We were all like, this is it. This is the end of the show. And then this episode was the first one to bring back Harlow for just a single scene. And I can remember like the shock and joy hearing his voice because I knew that old people would still come back. And then came Katrina and Jason and Mitch and Jack and Joanne and Monty and Jeff Lewis and Bill Kendall and so many others that it didn't feel nearly as desperate anymore. Which I know Victoria wasn't a fan of Harlow's appearance in the episode or anything in this episode, but...
I don't like this episode. I think it is bad.
Do you have anything else to contribute at the moment? I know we're trying to power through this, but I don't want to be the only one talking.
I like the part with Eugene where he does science by design.
Yes.
The rest is bad.
This
is a bad episode.
The science by design bit that Eugene does is, of course, a callback to the Truth Chronicles because they were like, hey, this is the first episode to bring back Captain Absolutely, so simultaneously we're going to bring back Eugene's thing as well. Makes sense, put him in the same episode. Eugene's also there for the, like, Never Steal Something Mechanized in 1986 bit, which still cracks me up because, honestly, the way Wooton goes through the series of logic there feels very much like a Mabim Bam bit with slightly, like, tweaked delivery, obviously, but still, like, the way he goes through the logic of it off the rails without Eugene interjecting really feels very McElroy to me. So...
I don't like this episode.
Thank you, Victoria. Thank you for your fresh insight.
I try my best.
I feel bad barreling through the talking points so quickly because I know that we want to get through this quickly, but I don't...
We want to talk about the bad episode. Why it is bad.
You caught me monologuing, you sly dog. That's a callback.
You caught me talking about the bad episode.
That's a callback to when we talked about Syndrome. in part. Wait, was that in the lost footage?
That was the second recording.
All right, never mind. The secret callback.
Great callback that only I'm gonna get.
That's all that.
And didn't think was a great callback.
That's all that matters.
Yay!
That's all that matters to me, Victoria.
I should have flipped this down. Everything is ruined.
Sorry?
Never mind. My camera was like flipped, so you couldn't see me very well, and I just moved it down.
It's all about.
We have to record everything again. So
one more time.
One more time. Go number 4.
I like how Eugene, before we talk about like the overall theme in its entirety, there's a very small thing.
I like Eugene too.
So do I. There's a very small thing that Eugene points out that I really like in his Science by Design bit, that not only should our entertainment have a point, which is the lesson of the episode, but that we as humans actively seek out meaning wherever we can get it, whether it is there or not, which is something I always find really fascinating psychologically, like our drive to seek out patterns, signs, symbols, or significance to random events. My favorite archetypal examples of this are that movie about the number 23. The guy was like, it's everywhere.
That's a good movie, and I wish that Jim
Carrey?
No.
Carrey.
Yeah, Jim Carrey would be in more serious roles because he's like a really good serious actor. Number 23, I didn't really like that movie, but I liked him in it. And also Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind is like a really, really good movie, and he's amazing in it. And it's like not a comedy at all.
I haven't seen the movie, but we talked about it.
I need you to watch it. It's on Netflix now.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, but we talked about it in Psych when we were talking about confirmation bias. My other favorite archetypal example, and link to this in the description, is the 2 very short Achievement Hunter achievement guides about the bug jars in Skyrim, which are hilarious, and it's literally like a cumulative 5 minutes altogether probably, so, go down in the description and watch that right now.
My favorite example of searching for meaning in media is Shakespeare's Cymbeline, my favorite Shakespeare play, where basically it's one of the last plays he wrote, and in it he reuses a lot of characters from past plays, so like kind of what they were like in other plays, and like a lot of story elements, and it makes it seem like, oh, this character is going to do this one thing, and then this person's going to die, and this person's going to think this other person's cheating on them, and it's like a mashup of like Othello and and kind of Hamlet-y, and lots of Much Ado About Nothing, because it's got that dang Claudio character in it. Rah! And then you're like, I know where this is going, and it does a complete 180, and it turns into like freaking Mulan meets Legally Blonde, and it becomes the best thing ever. And then you're like, whoa, dang, I have no idea where this is going, and then everything gets like so surreal, and then you think it's gonna lead up to a tragedy, but then everything ends up really good for literally every character except for like 2. And there's so many of these characters that you expect to be punished, and from other Shakespeare plays and how he writes and stuff, they would normally be punished, but they're not being punished. Everyone's being let off the hook basically, and you're like, well, what was the point in that? And it creates this really kind of disturbing, uncanny valley feel to how he normally writes, because it's definitely his writing, but everything's just a little bit off. And then you're like, whoa, I don't understand what the meaning of this is. And then you talk about it with your teacher, and the whole class talks about it, and then you find out the play's about searching for meaning, and the reason there's so many things that are repetitive and compared to his different plays is because it's supposed to emulate how sometimes life can have weird coincidences and deja vu and things, and it's supposed to represent how you search for meaning in life. And it's just oh, I love Cymbeline so much. Everyone go read it. It's really good. It's the only Shakespeare play to make me cry while reading it. It's so good, and it's just so beautifut, and it's just,
I was thinking about you in this rant earlier this week. On Tuesday, Achievement Hunter put out
Cymbeline.
a Trivial Pursuit video And
I want to see a performance of Cymbeline. That would be amazing.
on one of the grab bag questions where they have like the 16 answers and half are right and half are wrong, it was plays by Shakespeare, and the last answer that nobody got right was Cymbeline. And I was like, oh, Victoria would be so mad if she saw this.
I think my copy of Cymbeline is in my room. You should go read it.
Well, in your room here. I was like, I'm a little far away, Victoria.
Even then, I would like hand it off to you when you come visit in a couple weeks.
A line that I feel like really it encapsulates this idea really well was the Eighth Doctor's line from the Doctor Who movie, the 95 movie, where it's like, oh, humans always looking for patterns in places they don't exist. Or it came to me when you're talking about Cymbeline too, right near the end of Homestuck, where Rose kind of has this nervous breakdown about like, why didn't my character arc wrap up this way? Like, this doesn't make any sense. And Dave's like, dude, we're human beings. We don't have character arcs and like set developments and stuff. Like, we're just human beings. We don't all have to have, like a denouement and a climax and stuff. We're just living life and growing as people. That I really like, which is very indicative of Hussey, the way he breaks down narrative structure like that. Anyways, good stuff.
What about me?
Hmm?
What about me? I'm not breaking down narrative structure.
Yes, you in a, just as literal way as Hussey. Equally literal ways of breaking down story structure.
Thank you.
Which is a very high compliment for me.
Thank you.
So
thank you.
You're welcome. I mean, look at my shirt. I got a compliment on this shirt today at work. I was like, nice. Homestuck.
And then you took off the shirt and you gave it to them.
Yes.
And you're like wearing the same shirt underneath it though. And then they like stare at you kind of horrified, and you do finger guns and you walk away.
I actually have all.
And then you never talk to them.
I actually have all of the Beta Kid shirts layered together.
That's so deep. I bet people are going to do a Tumblr analysis post on that later.
There's already 6 of them written. There's already discourse going on. 6 people have been given death threats already. Now we get to the actual theme of this episode. The theme of this episode. Themes. To quote Stephen Fry on the theme episode of QI. This is a very unique episode, so unique that the theme listed on the back of the album and in the official guide for it is just 3 question marks. Themes.
I'll never forget that, because I remember when we first got the album, because one of the first things we do when we get albums is we like look at all the names and themes on the back.
It was just a dumb reason.
Then
it totally,
we
completely...
We saw question marks and we were like, what is this? I also remember the first time I saw like fast as I can, and underneath that said fasting, and I was like, what is fasting?
Oh.
But because I was thinking like it was just someone like running really fast, and I wasn't thinking of like fasting as in like not doing something.
I remember
and praying instead. And I don't know why, but yeah. I
was upset about how the whole like twist of Cousin Albert was ruined for me because of that, because it's like lesson illiteracy. I was like, okay, guess I know what's going on with Albert. Kind of says it right there on the tin. But I mean, hey, now that's the album description for every album, thanks to the 6 episodes. So, themes in media are such a difficult balance to strike properly. Very delicate balance. Obviously, AIOO and lots of other Christian media is often very heavy-handed in the delivery of its morals, with white knight protagonists and a segment at the end where the lesson is explicitly told to the audience in case they couldn't figure it out. Not always, but often. On the other end of the spectrum, we have media like Breaking Bad or Rick and Morty or Fight Club, which can deliver brilliant lessons, and honestly, they're not even hard to understand the point at all, but people are still so dense and so wrapped up in confirmation bias that without having it spelled out for them, they take the protagonist as being a role model and never consider that the lesson is a cautionary tale, and you're not supposed to want to be Walter White. You're not supposed to want to be Tyler Durden or Rick Sanchez. They're bad people. That's the point. And confirmation bias plays a big part in that, but the point stands. Striking the right balance of subtlety and exposition is difficult. Obviously, I have to include here the very famous quotes from Martin Luther about how being a good Christian shoemaker doesn't mean nailing tiny crosses to your shoes. It means making the best shoes you possibly can. And the more recent, more specific quote about how we need less content creators making Christian books, movies, and TV, and more Christian content creators making books, movies, and TV, because your values and your worldview and your heart should shine through in your life and by extension the media you create. You don't need to like hammer a theme into everything. If you have that love in your heart, then that will shine through, and the compassion in the things that you do. Whether you try or not, a heart attuned with God is always going to teach, instruct, and admonish through its creations. It's part of God's love for this world, and it should naturally overflow from us as we live. For example, many of the Novacom episodes that didn't have a specific lesson with a scripture attached at the end, but the heart is still clearly felt within, as is specifically addressed in the Novacom box set extra bonus audio stuff. I have no end of lessons well delivered in media, like times that balance was struck well. Steven Universe, great one for that. My favorite really clever niche example was the episode about Ronaldo wanting to join the Crystal Gems. That was a great lesson about cultural appropriation. So many shows that deal with metaphors for systemic racism, but as Victoria was recently commenting to me, not so recent at this point, Star Versus had some particularly well-delivered moments in season 3.
Wait, I want to quickly touch on this.
Temple Party
Star
episode.
Versus The Forces of Evil is one of my favorite current Disney shows. There's this one really tiny moment. It's only probably about like
1 second.
10 seconds long or something.
2 seconds,
like
3 seconds even.
Yeah, 3 seconds long in an episode where like all these characters are like being looked after really well, and they're being given like hot chocolate and stuff, and they're all humans, and then like all these monsters are being like taken into police custody like after a party that all of them were at. And then Star's just like, hey, what the heck is this nonsense? And then it's good.
Yeah.
It's a good moment.
And I know generally it's a pretty like annoying trend in media to make metaphors for racism where the minority is a non-human group, because it's like a very othering thing to do. I think Star Wars has done a good job with it. On the other hand, we have things like Detroit Become Human, which just came out, and lots of people have been making fun of very hard on the internet. The first episode...
Well, the thing with Star Versus is lots of people don't consider Marco to be human. They consider him to be a monster because of everything that's happened with him. So Marco represents the monsters and Star represents the humans.
Today, AH put out the first episode of their Let's Watch of Detroit, and the intro, like before the game is actually started, it's like Jennifer Lawrence robot like talking to you and being like, I'm gonna help you like set up your game and stuff. And at the end, when you try to start the game, she's like, and remember, this is not a game. This is the future. And I was like...
I should watch that later. That sounds terribly bad.
Oh, it was horrific. But yeah, so many good things. Once upon a time, Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. was delivering on themes of power, the power of persistent hope, one day at a time. So many examples, particularly the value of family, Westworld, the value of empathy, Black Panther, Diaspora and racial identity, Winter Soldier, Surveillance Terror State, Doctor Who, the value of life, Brooklyn Nine-Nine, everything. It's so easy to find the value and meaning in the things around us if we look for it, and media is all the deeper and richer for it, which can really all be even better summated than Martin Luther, forget him, with a classic Andrew Hussey quote regarding Homestuck, which I couldn't find the actual quote, but more or less he was like, if your story isn't all about the power of friendship and love, then it's crap and is meaningless. So, Captain Absolutely. Come to the main body of the story.
Also, I really want to point out really quickly, my favorite example of the argument between like, should media portray something like really strictly, like with Christianity, it's like, should this story be like very blatantly Christian or like just show the values through everything that everyone goes through, is the Tolkien versus C.S. Lewis debate with the Chronicles of Narnia and Lord of the Rings.
Yes.
Which is something that gets brought up a lot in English classes.
Yeah, it's got to be the best example because it's they're so similar enough in, not even just similar in the stories, but like in the fact that they knew each other so well and were friends, that it creates like this perfect like theoretical parallel to work off of, except it's not even theoretical. It's just perfect the way it works out.
And there are movies like Whoever Saves Christmas or whatever, or like God's Not Dead too, because they made a sequel for some reason and stuff like that.
And Fireproof and Save Life and all the bajillion others.
It's like I don't want to watch movies where and read books where like the whole deal is like very, very heavy Christianity stuff all the way through it and everything's a metaphor for like literally everything else. Like I'm fine with reading like one of those every now and then or watching one of those, except for I really want like a lot of media where there just happens to be a character who's a Christian
and isn't also
and
like a
and isn't
murderer or a
crazy
racist or a
villain,
rapist or
or they're like terrible. They're just like normal and they're also a Christian.
Yeah.
And you can tell like how their values influence them.
But it's
and
like
I
in
never
a good
see
way, yeah.
characters like that in anything.
Yeah, the two examples
That are actually like good guys. So I want more of that, please. There's books like Divergent where the author is a Christian and Christian things are brought up in the books. The main character of the books is not a Christian, but you can see like how being like from a Christian family influences her. And it's interesting. And I like that. And yeah, I wish there were like more books where characters were Christians, but it wasn't like the main focus is on how they're Christians. I want them to like bring up that they're a Christian naturally and then have other things happen to them also. Like I was reading a book recently called Winter Song, and then there's this one character and he was like, it was an adaptation, it was a retelling of Labyrinth. And then like the Jareth character, he was like, oh yes, I'm also a Christian. And he read like some verses before he went to bed, and then like the story kept on going also and like doing other things, but like every now and then he'd be like, oh yes, I was just playing like my lute or like my flute in the church, and I was like, I'm in love with you now.
And not because you're Jareth. It is completely unrelated.
It's not only because you're Jareth, it's also because of these other things. But like now I love you.
I think the two pieces of media that have done it the best, like making a character, you know, be a Christian stated, have it be involved in the plot, but not in like a negative or a heavy-handed, like overbearingly preachy way. Both in the MCU. One is Daredevil, and underneath that, Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. Both done really good jobs with that. Daredevil season 1, I guess, wasn't addressed as much in season 2.
In those two shows specifically.
Sorry?
Who are you talking about in those two shows specifically?
Daredevil, and then Mac and Elena both in Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D.
Yeah, and I didn't know that Mac was a Christian or Elena either. And I was like, oh, Mac, I love Mac, my boy.
He's good.
My good boy.
He's very good.
So, he's very good. And that's a good example, Devin.
Thank you.
Good job.
Thank you, Victoria.
Yeah, Mac is a good character. Put him in. Is he dead?
No.
Okay, no.
Spoilers, he
Mac
lives.
is good. He's a good boy.
I thought he was going to get stuck in the Matrix, and then he wasn't, and I was so happy. I was like, they had better not. So
he's good. I love Matt.
Captain Absolutely. Let's talk about the title of this episode, which, if I recall correctly, you never understood until the first recording of this. Even though I think
I might have picked up on it, or you explained it to me once.
They talk about broken pencils twice in the story.
Yeah, I know, but like I didn't think about the fact that like the broken pencils, they don't have a point.
Yes, well, that is the point of them talking about it in the mentions.
Yeah, I know, but I didn't think about it like with the title also.
In fairness, I'd probably listen to this episode maybe 2 or 3 times before getting it, but counter fairness, those 2 or 3 times probably happened in like the same 1 or 2 days, so it was a very short period of time to process it.
I've definitely listened to it more than that many times. Like,
let me just check, because we talked about this the first time. I want to see how many times I've listened to Wooton's Broken Pencil Show. According to my iTunes.
Mine would be wrong, because I got a new computer recently.
Well, if you carried over your data, it should carry it over.
Yeah, but sometimes my data messes up because I fall asleep and my laptop or phone are playing things. So my numbers are never right.
According to this, and it could be incorrect, at least 8 times. But I'm pretty sure it's at least 10 or 12. So.
Yeah, I've probably heard it that many times too, or maybe a little bit less.
So.
I don't like it though. So.
Yeah, what I was saying the first time, I've listened to this episode a bajillion times because before we caught up with the show, which was during the second hiatus, when we got new albums, what we would do is we would listen to one episode every day. Well, at first we'd listen to a disc every day. Once we got closer to catching up, we'd spread it out by doing a new episode every day. And up until album 55, we didn't listen to episodes when they came out on the radio. We bought the album first, and then we would listen to it on disc. And right when I was reaching the end of listening to album 52, I got strep throat, which is probably the funnest illness I've ever had that required me to stay home from something, because I felt pretty fine. Normally, you're like, oh, I wish I was sick so that I could stay home from work. And then you actually get sick and you're like, wow, this sucks. I just want to sleep and die all day and I can't do anything fun. Strep throat was this beautiful middle ground where...
There's someone listening to this with strep throat, but they're like in a lot of pain and they're just sad.
I felt pretty all right, but I was contagious for 48 hours after going on antibiotics, which meant even though I felt good, I still could not go to school. So I had 2 days off, and I spent the entire time listening to album 52 on repeat while playing Nitro games on Nitro.com. So I'd listened to this album like a dozen times all the way through in the span of like 48-ish hours. So I've heard this episode a lot. Back to Captain Absolutely.
This episode bad.
Back to Captain Absolutely.
The reason I don't like this episode is because I love Captain Absolutely in his first appearance. I love him in his first 2 episodes. I always forget what they're called. I remember 3 in 1 and...
Truth Be Told.
Truth Be Told? Yeah, Truth Be Told.
Not in the opposite order.
Yeah, Truth Be Told is my favorite Captain Absolutely episode. And then 3 in 1 is my second favorite. I personally think that Captain Absolutely got the soul sucked out of him increasingly more and more as he was in more episodes. It's like he was a little plate of butter and he'd been spread on a lot of toast.
A little bit too thin.
Each time a little bit more thin until there's just no butter and it's just toast.
But
the toast is also now burnt. And it's just bad.
He's the little disposable bottle of hand soap in your kitchen that you're almost at the bottom, but you don't want to buy another one, so you just keep on adding water to the bottle, diluting it down so you don't have to buy more soap.
And then I come in and I shake my head and I say, no, not this. Stop.
Not today.
This is bad.
Never again.
And then I hand them new Drake the Cosmic Copper brand soap, and I say,
it just has copper in it.
Good.
It turns your hands green.
And then I push down the thing and I force their hand underneath. And then I lather their hands for them, and then I say, go out into the world.
It's a very awkward hand washing situation. Very intimate.
They needed to be stopped.
So, yeah, I think I said it last time. Captain Absolutely really... the concept of his character was too specific. So he was designed for his origin story. He fit in well with his first episode, and everything after that point was them trying to stretch him out beyond what he was designed to be. So that's why the first episode's good, and the rest of it's like, and then it becomes push the red button, and it's like,
you have to push the red button, and you're like, can someone push the red button that kills me, that just like explodes everything?
the button, and you're just like,
please.
Yeah. The button that gives you $1 million, but you will die.
But you die, yeah.
Yeah, no, so I get the whole bit with like the Captain Absolutely story here. The title of the episode is all a big pun regarding point as in meaning versus point as in a sharp apex. However, Thug, Clock Ripper, whatever his last name's supposed to be, he opens his plan with the idea that everything's going to be... he's going to physically eliminate points by smoothing the world, and in some roundabout symbolic classic comic book level of nonsense that's going to make things be pointless. And then he unveils his actual plan, which is to basically gas the planet with nitrous oxide and make everyone happy, which accomplishes what he wanted, but it means his entire diatribe about wanting to make the world round really has no meaning in a literal or a figurative sense, because it's an extension of a pun. So in and of itself, it doesn't even have a hidden meaning to it. It like only tangentially, horizontally has that extra meaning. And then he still, even after that point later, makes a remark about how pencils will be broken the world over, which comes back about to this confusing contention once the episode derives its name that really makes no sense in the end. In the title of the episode, it makes sense, but in the context of the actual Wooton story, it is extra
Devin, can I tell you
nonsensical.
a secret?
What?
Good.
What?
This episode is bad. Did you think I was actually going to say something new?
No, I
Okay.
expect you to say, it's not supposed to make, it's not going to make sense or something to that effect. The funniest line
He's bad.
funniest line in this episode is when Red breaks Connie's window and then he goes, "Or was it sound effects? Kids, it's time to talk about the nature of reality." It's just...
Well, there was a really funny line in our first recording where Devin goofed up something and he was like, "Darn it, I don't know what this is." And I was like, "Kids, it's time to talk about the nature of reality." And it was really funny when we lost.
But now you can just believe us and laugh
Devin,
laugh vicariously.
We should just make up fake things about past recordings.
And then I did a backflip. I have an 8-foot vertical leap.
And then Katie and Will showed up, and we recorded.
Hey guys, it's Sonic the Hedgehog with a big bag of weed. Oh, it's good. I can't believe I watched an episode of it with Grandma.
I can't believe you did that either. Why did you do that? Anyway. You should watch an episode with Brent if you have enough time.
Yeah.
Anyway.
So, it's a very funny line coming from Red, especially when you think about it out of context. Like, because
I thought you meant I have Sonic, the Sonic the Hedgehog.
Because I just picture like Red turned around in his armchair, like a good old 90s PSA. Oh, it's very funny. The end of the story, Drake, throws the balloon into space with the thing, and then the vacuum of space causes it to pop. And then the people on the space station were all like, "Well, nothing matters." How did gas get inside the space station? I'm a biochemist, not a physicist. I'm pretty sure space stations are supposed to be airtight and shouldn't be sucking in the vacuum of space from the outside. Maybe that's just me. I don't know. We could ask Brent. He's an engineer.
Like, why not?
Yeah.
Dream your dreams. Get that bad juice sucked in there.
And then the end of the episode, Wooton interrupting Chris's wrap-up, which is...
bad. It's bad. You have to admit, it's bad.
Yeah, it's terrible. It's horrendous.
Bad. And then he does it another time, and then it's bad. And then I have the hiccups.
It's
and
so
then Jay
bad that
does it
your
one
diaphragm
time,
is
and I'm like,
spasming in protest.
"Jay, my boy, I love you, but this is bad. You need to stop."
I know. So that's the first behind-the-scenes thing from the guide, which is behind the scenes. Why does entertainment need a point? To address this question, we created an episode that had no point. Or did it? The title referenced an everyday object that had no point. Get it? Get it? It was also the first show to have a character, Wooton, reading the closing wrap-up for the show. It worked well. And since we're always looking for new creative ways to handle the raps, Jay Smouse later read the raps for Unbecoming Jay, album 54. There's a lot of awkward humor moments in that paragraph, or attempted humor paragraphs, I should say, moments, which really reflects and embodies the episode.
That sums up this entire episode.
It really embodies the episode really well. And then,
Devin, this is the best behind-the-scenes guide we've ever gotten.
And then behind the scenes, also, Connie misplaced her car keys in several episodes around this time, including Wooton's Broken Pencil Show and A Thanks-Taking Story. Eugene always helped Connie find her keys in these shows, but when he was first introduced, it was Eugene who was always losing his keys. Note that this paragraph doesn't say, "We decided to do this because we were flipping the script." It's just like, also Eugene used to do it. There's no indication of cause and effect.
If they forgot who was the one who originally lost their keys, and they're like, "It was Connie, wasn't it?" And then they went back and they're like, "Oh wait, it was Eugene." And they're like, "This is what we call narrative parallels, children." And we're gonna talk about it now.
Yeah, Red Holler turns his chair around. Yeah. Kids, it's time to talk about narrative juxtaposition. Also, I never noticed before reading this thing. Did you ever notice there was some sort of, thing happening with Connie and her keys?
I mean, that's what happens in the episode.
A density of multiple episodes? Because I definitely did not. They only named...
I guess it also happens in A Thanks-Taking Carol.
Yes, story, yeah. They named 2 episode.
Connie
I don't know.
Just loses a lot of things. I feel like they put more emphasis on the fact that Eugene loses things because it happened in like 2 episodes after he first showed up.
Yeah, but they only named
Except for it
2
happens to
episodes
Connie
here,
way more.
one of which is this episode, so.
So, also, this episode is bad, so I don't really care.
So, this episode, it has its moments. I think the Red stuff with Red is pretty humorous, like especially given I'm not a huge fan of Red normally as a character, so I enjoyed the stuff with him. I like the stuff with Eugene. The Captain Absolute story is just right out like, bleh, not a fan. And Wit feels kind of weird as well, like at the end when he's like color commentating Eugene and Connie's argument with Wooton. Feels kind of strange for Wit to do. You know, I think you were talking...
it's definitely out of character.
You were talking about instances of mischaracterization last time. I think you're talking about either Eugene or Wooton as well.
Everyone is mischaracterized in this episode, except for Eugene. During, like, lots of it, Connie has moments where she's not mischaracterized.
I think Connie's pretty good.
I don't even know what they're doing.
I think Eugene's all right.
I just said Eugene's all right.
Yeah. I mean, in fairness...
Connie's all right for the most part. Everyone else, they're just...
In fairness, this episode was written...
Drake is the... Not Drake. Captain absolutely has the worst of it. He's just bad. Yeah. Everything is bad. That's why I was so happy about Drake not being so terrible after...
And as you really emphasized last time, the gap between Captain Absolute's first appearance, or last appearance, and this episode, and the gap it's half as long as the gap between Drake's first episode and Drake and Time Forgot. Drake
did so much better. Maybe they should have waited a couple more years.
Yeah, should have let him age like a fine wine a little more. In fairness, this episode was written by a very new writer who didn't really have a handle on the characters yet, like didn't really understand everything. Oh wait, it was written by Paul McCusker.
Oh, I actually believed you. I almost felt bad for a second.
It was written by Paul.
Never mind.
Who had written, I think, at least 10 or so episodes by this point, somewhere
no
around
excuse.
There. So,
no excuse.
Should have a vague grasp on the characters.
Wait, who wrote the new Drake episode?
Bob Hoos. Remember, he's been working on it since the first episode. First Drake episode.
I forgot.
Yeah.
But, like, I needed to make... I wanted to ask, like, if it was someone else other than him. But... You know what? It shows that he's been working on the Drake episode a long time. This is so much better than Paul's episode. I'm proud of him. I am proud of you. Good job. I sincerely mean that. Good job.
So, what's your rating for this episode, Victoria?
I'm gonna give it, like... This episode is just... I don't know. I think this episode's stupid. Just, it's way too... I don't even know if I call it silly. It's just kind of crosses the line from being... There's like a very thin line between silly and stupid, which lots of shows teeter on and do it very well without crossing over to being stupid, which some people might not agree with this, but I think SpongeBob did that pretty good in early episodes of its run.
Better than people appreciate.
But better than people think. I was rewatching some SpongeBob episodes, which I have not done in years, a couple months ago, and I was like, okay, I'm gonna try not to laugh, and I'm gonna seriously watch this. And then
from a purely artistic perspective.
I watched one episode, and I was like, okay, if I laugh independently 10 times in the span of like this 11-minute half episode, that means SpongeBob used to be a good show, and I'm justified in the fact that I liked it as a kid. And I laughed like 20 times, and I was like, well, okay, the science checks out.
It is objectively funny.
Yeah, and then this was just bad. It crossed the line into stupid too many times for me. I don't like it. I'll give it like a 1.5 out of 5. Honestly, the only redeeming thing in this episode for me
is Eugene's bit.
Eugene. And I don't want to give it like a 1 out of 5.
I think Eugene's bit is good. I like Red's bit. Most of the rest of it is out. The story and the plot, the humor is like, but it does have a really good theme. And it is the only episode with that theme. So it's like, Yeah, there's a lot more weighing against it than 4, I will admit. But the theme and how it's, like, the way they do it, I think is, can't be discounted. I'm going to give it a 2.5.
That's a little bit less than I thought you'd give it.
Well, the story
okay.
is still terrible, like 80% of the episode.
Thank you.
So,
Thank you. I appreciate it. I appreciate you being on my side. Anyway, let's
next time, Victoria.
Stop. What?
Next time.
Book.
Mm-hmm.
Book.
Which one?
6.
Yep.
6. Problems in Plymouth.
Yes. Imagination Station.
I did not have to look at the name off of my desktop.
Elysium.
It's the Imagination Station books. I've already made some dank memes for it from just reading through the first couple pages, so it's gonna be a wild ride.
You're only a couple pages in? You've had 2 weeks to read it, Victoria. It takes an hour.
Dude, I was like on page 2 and I made that meme and it took me like 10 minutes.
You could have read like 16% of the book in that time.
Yeah, but I made a meme instead. Dude, what's worth more value?
You're correct.
I was not in the wrong here.
I know.
How many memes did you make while reading it?
Less.
How many?
So that's what we're doing next time.
Did you make a single one?
No.
I win.
So that's what we're doing next time. Until then, thank you for joining us on our side of the YouTube. I've been Devin Francis, also known as Leonard Meltzner.
And if this did not record, I'm gonna go cry.
That's the end of the podcast.
Yeah.
Forever.
Yeah. So if you never hear from us again, you know why. Actually, you don't know why. This episode won't. Yeah.
You're correct. So goodbye.
Maybe
forever.
Forever.